want everyone to close their eyes for a minute and take a deep breath. Keep your eyes closed. Deep breathing. Imagine yourself at 90 years old. Look down at your beautiful, weathered hands and think of all the things you've accomplished, created, and built. All the people and creatures that you've nurtured. These hands have power. They've connected you to your world. They've been with you through everything. Reflect on your journey and its ups and downs over the last several decades. Imagine the sense of peace you feel knowing that you've had a chance to explore many versions of yourself, to do meaningful work and make positive change. Now open your eyes. Did 90-year-old you feel exuberant, energized, peaceful? Hopefully. I'm Lauryn Morris, a startup founder, product designer, a strategist, a mom, and a dreamer. I'm going to talk to you today about circular design. I'm also going to talk to you about how slowing down can lead to more momentum, not less, and how following your curiosity can lead to breakthroughs and reinvention, both personally and professionally. In doing so, I hope that it becomes clear how you could apply your own skill sets to the circular economy, and I'll show you how I've done that myself. We're going to go on a journey together. There will be ups and downs, but I promise I will end with a call to action and something that can leave you with a sense of hope and excitement for the future. Old pic of me in school. Imagine that. This was actually this image right here was a picture that I had up on my desk. I think it was a quote from John Maeda, who taught at the MIT Media Lab. All I want to be is someone that makes new things and thinks about them. That defined me. I was drawn to the profession of industrial design back in high school, I think when I was 16, when I learned that industrial design was this ideal blend of art and science and a chance for me to influence the way that objects look and the way that people interact with them. I graduated from this incredible program with a degree in industrial design in the early 2000s. And while studying here, it sometimes felt like I lived in this building. I spent many hours in the wood workshops carving foam, creating marker renderings on vellum paper, working in the computer lab with pixels and vectors and splines, and developing a knack for compelling storytelling to express desire for consumer products. In the nearly 20 years since graduating, I designed and developed physical and digital products and platforms with the goal of empowering people to be expressive, to be curious, and to unlock their greatest potential. Over the most recent decade, I had the opportunity to design groundbreaking wearable augmented reality headsets, influencing both the hardware and the software technology alongside brilliant minds at Snapchat. Throughout this time, I always had a soft spot for vehicles. Those were a couple of my daily drivers in the last 15 years. I love the sense of freedom and joy that comes with driving older cars. I also spent a lot of time in factories in China and experienced firsthand what it takes to manufacture things at scale. And here we go again, another hidden slide. So, overconsumption. This is a picture of Bed Bath & Beyond. That's the vibe I was going for on this slide. The more time that I spent working in-house for companies, designing products from sketch to final engineered mass-produced product, the more waste I noticed. The sales teams I worked for and worked with pushed our team for more variety in color and size and style to satisfy the buyers at the retail stores. These decisions served an end customer who assumes that they need something new, even when their old thing hasn't reached its end of life yet, end of usable life. The role that I was playing in overconsumption was beginning to make me feel uncomfortable, and this compounded over time as I took on new roles at different companies. As a member of IDSA, despite attending the annual sustainability conference, I didn't feel that there were great resources to guide me as I considered ways to challenge the status quo of manufacturing and consumption. I began to feel a distance from my beloved industrial design profession. On top of feeling misaligned and jaded, I was burnt out from my 15 years working in corporate America at a desk in front of a computer. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to make things anymore. My husband and I had been living in our high desert home in the mountains north of LA. During my period of professional uncertainty, our property was devastated by a sudden, out of control 100,000 acre wildfire. As we've all seen, especially over the last 2 weeks here in LA, wildfires have become more common and more severe in recent decades. Our land has recovered now, but this experience deeply impacted me and became one of the primary motivators for me in wanting to do what I can to address the climate crisis. So in 2023, I took a year-long sabbatical, reflecting on the changing state of the world and recalibrating towards a mission of positive impact as a product designer. Following my curiosity during that time led to breakthrough ideas. I wanted to share a little bit more about that. Following your curiosity. I wanted to feel isolated and disconnected during that time to counter the hyperconnectivity that I was recovering from. I spent the first few weeks outside, working with my hands, gardening, pruning trees, weeding. I started reading books that had been on my shelf, gathering dust. I started meditating again. My mind began to wake up and notice things, to wonder. I felt curious, and I had time to follow that curiosity. Ideas popped up, I pursued them, and my interest in them grew deeper. As I began to pull on some of the threads that were catching my attention, I realized I was achieving a flow state that I hadn't felt in a long time. That term, flow, was coined by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who is the father of positive psychology, which is the scientific study of what makes life worth living. He described flow as being completely involved in activity for its own sake. The ego falls away. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. I know many of you have experienced flow, maybe in this building, maybe elsewhere on campus, maybe one of your late night work sessions in the studio, gearing up for a big design project deadline. I also spent some time studying the books and theories of artist and designer Leonard Cohen, who writes about the concerns he had when comparing consumption habits in America versus his new home of Japan. I also spent a lot of time considering the principles of the feminine economy as outlined by Jennifer Armbrust, who's a thought leader and founder of the Feminine Business School. This all resonated with me as I searched for a version of design and work that was more mindful, collaborative, resourceful, values-driven, generous, and transparent. I started learning about career accelerators in the climate space and came across Climate-Based. I became a Climate-Based fellow and learned about other opportunities like Terra.do and Engineering. It's not a typo. These programs are fully remote, open to all professions, and provide an intensive curriculum focused on education about climate science, networking with others, and you can even pitch a climate tech startup idea and have others join you to work on it. People I met came from all backgrounds, from user research to data analysis and marketing, software engineering. Some were recent graduates, while others had over 25 years of working experience. During my Climate-Based fellowship, I only came across a few other people with backgrounds in hardware, but all of them were mechanical engineers or manufacturing engineers. In my cohort of 300 people, I was the only industrial designer. If you have an interest in learning about how you can apply your skills to climate work, I strongly encourage you to consider applying for these fellowships, regardless of your years of experience. Following my curiosity and finding flow helped me to see clearly that I still wanted to make things at scale, but I wanted to use my skills to create positive impact. Like I'm sure many of you are, I was inspired by the Japanese art of golden repair, or kintsugi, which fosters that idea that something broken can be repaired and be useful once again. It was crystal clear to me that I wanted to work on regenerative design. Sustainability in the field of design is a widely studied subject and well-established domain. In the middle of the 20th century, influential design thinkers like Buckminster Fuller and Victor Papanek raised awareness of aspects of sustainability in the design professions. And towards the transition from the 20th to the 21st centuries, the notion of sustainability had become more mainstream. Buckminster Fuller was a designer and inventor, as well as a writer and an outspoken environmental activist. Fuller is probably most well known for his geodesic dome, but he was also one of the first designers to promote a systemic worldview. His famous term, Spaceship Earth, encapsulated the concern that the Earth's resources are limited and must be managed wisely. All of his work across architecture, engineering, and design was grounded in the principles of energy and material efficiency. Victor Papanek, was also ahead of his time and anticipated an understanding of design as a tool for political change and social good that is more relevant today than ever. He was one of the first designers to critically question design's social and ecological consequences, introducing a new set of ethical questions into the design field. He warned against the frivolities and excesses of design. and promoted community co-design centered on environmental accountability, social inclusion, and political transparency. His 1971 book, Design for the Real World, was a loud and clear call for an emerging generation of designers to seriously contemplate their role in facilitating social change in the face of accelerated consumer culture, political strife, and environmental depletion. These are my well-worn copies of these books. In 1960, cultural commentator Vance Packard, 1960, you guys, wrote a book called The Waste Makers about the dangers of planned obsolescence and overconsumption. 40 years later, architect Bill McDonough pioneered the concept of the circular economy and co-authored the 2002 book, Cradle to Cradle, with German chemist Michael Brungart. Similar to Buckminster Fuller's philosophy, Cradle to Cradle design is an approach of the design of products and systems that's modeled upon nature, where waste is valuable and materials should be viewed as nutrients that can be fed into a continuous loop. So before we jump into the circular economy, let's talk a little bit about our current linear economy. It's been around since the Industrial Revolution. It's a hallmark of our industrial design profession. As a society, we got really good at extracting or taking materials from the ground, making them into things that we want and need, using things like production, advertising, and cheap credit. We convinced ourselves that we could chuck things away when we didn't want them anymore, didn't need them anymore, and we didn't have to worry about the consequences. This model enabled billions of people throughout the past few hundred years, and really accelerated in the last 60 years, to have amazing things, not just luxury or indulgent things, but medicines, healthy food, roof over your head, warm clothes, communication technology, transportation. It raised the living standards for many people. But we understand now that resources are finite, and that if we continue to do this continuously, we can't run from the consequences. There's a need for people, for all of you in this room, to use your expertise and creativity to challenge the status quo. The circular economy is a system where materials never become waste and nature is regenerated. In a circular economy, products and materials are kept in circulation through processes like maintenance, reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture, recycling, composting. It's based on 3 principles. 1, eliminate waste and pollution. We should take inspiration from natural systems where there's no concept of waste. Everything is a resource for something else. We should use clean and renewable energy, which is clean, low cost to operate, creates no emissions, utilizes abundant resources. By eliminating waste and pollution, we reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain. So that's number 1. Number 2, circulate products and materials. Biological nutrients should be safely returned to the soil, while technical nutrients should be used again and again at their highest value. By circulating products and materials, we retain their embodied energy. 3, regenerate natural systems. Biodiversity builds resilience in natural systems. And by regenerating nature, we sequester carbon and soil. There are 2 cycles that make up the circular economy. I mentioned them a second ago. This 2-winged diagram illustrates these 2 cycles, and it's sometimes called the butterfly diagram. On the left side is the biological cycle, which covers renewable raw materials that can return to the earth. Food, wood, cotton, anything that, if it's designed correctly, would biodegrade. And these materials are valuable because they can regenerate soil. On the right side is the technical cycle, which covers materials that won't eventually break down and biodegrade, things like metals, plastics, synthetic chemicals. These materials are valuable and should be recovered and continuously cycle through the system so their value can be captured and recaptured. So in that technical cycle, the goal with the technical material is to keep it in use for as long as possible. The higher value strategies are those that target the inner loops, keep items in circulation through sharing systems, maintenance, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing. Recycling is on the far edge because it should be considered a last resort. Take a phone, for example. The phone itself has the most value. So yes, we'd want to recycle the parts and the materials that make up the phone, but it's most valuable still assembled. So in that case, you want to keep it as the product for as long as possible. Making something, again, from raw or from salvage materials takes a lot of money and energy. The biological or renewable side of the diagram focuses on biodegradable materials that can be returned to the earth. They can be broken down through processes like composting and anaerobic digestion, which releases nutrients that can help regenerate soil. These nutrients can then be used to grow new biodegradable materials like food or cotton, and then the cycle continues. So in agriculture, shifting to regenerative production practices, eliminating food waste, and using better or upcycled ingredients in our food products and menus could cut food system emissions in half by 2050. Some products like cotton clothing or wooden furniture can be circulated through both the biological and the technical cycles. So looking down at the bottom where it's red, the cascading principle, a piece of wood can be made into a table, eventually broken down and turned into a particle board, and eventually broken down into compost. A t-shirt can become wadding, stuffing, sound insulation, and then back to the soil. But it's critical that toxic inks and similar treatments aren't used. If you put a toxic ink on a piece of paper, it can't be recycled and turned into a cereal box. Here's a short video by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that does a really good job explaining these concepts.
In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food, energy is provided by the sun, things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. Our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term. So what can? If we accept that the living world's cyclical model works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build capital rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components, and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated.
So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation promotes the circular economy through education and works with businesses, policymakers, and academics. I recommend spending some time on their website. I've gone down a lot of deep rabbit holes. It's ellenmacarthurfoundation.org. The big point here, summed up nicely by the designers at Slow Factory, which you should also follow them, is that everything you make returns to the earth as either food or poison. So why, you might be asking, why is this important now? Why is it any different than the 1950s, 60s, and 70s when Victor Papanek, Buckminster Fuller, and Vance Pickard were talking about these same issues? It's impossible to ignore that overconsumption results in vast amounts of pollution and waste every day. For example, we already have enough clothing on the planet to dress the next six generations of people. We're also facing an unprecedented amount of confusing information, and companies have put the responsibility on the shoulders of consumers instead of taking responsibility themselves. Take the plastics industry, for example. I took a virtual class a couple years ago through Bennington College called Beyond Plastics with Judith Enck. I highly recommend checking that out. I think it's a free course, open to anyone. The takeaway is that plastics recycling is an abysmal failure. It's such a failure that some actually see it as a scam. Plastics are the plan B for fossil fuel companies looking for a new source of revenue. Scientists say that by next year, for every 3 pounds of fish, there will be 1 pound of plastic in the ocean. And for the amount of plastic produced is forecast to triple by 2050 without new policies. Plastics play an important role in some industries for sure, such as medical devices, sterile applications. However, 42% of plastics produced today are used for single-use packaging. 42%. A detail I thought you might find interesting. The original recycling symbol was designed in 1970 by Gary Anderson, a senior at the University of Southern California, as a submission for a contest to promote the recycling of paper goods. His recycling symbol became public domain, and the plastics industry adopted a very similar symbol to number their resins. That symbol on the bottom of your plastic food container is not a recycling symbol. It's a plastic resin code. The only resins that can go in the recycling bin are marked with a number 1 and a number 2. Number 1 and number 2 only. And even those only have a 6% chance of being recycled. It's never hit double digits in the US, 6% chance. Number 1s and number 2s. So the solution with plastic is not to recycle, it's to make less plastic, to build systems that actually recycle, and to create single-use packaging alternatives. The progress that we've made in building efficiency over the last several decades also may not be as good as it seems. Jevons paradox is an economic principle that suggests that increases in efficiency can lead to an increase in consumption, thereby offsetting the gains made by the efficiency improvements themselves. We see this happening in the automotive sector. New cars are getting bigger and bigger. These energy-hungry body styles reduce gains in efficiency even when they're electric. In 1975, smaller sedans and wagons represented the majority of sales in the market, but have since dropped to about a quarter of the market. And then we have the climate science. Climate change is proceeding at a faster pace and producing widespread effects that are more definitively tied to human influence than ever before. The most striking sentence in the IPCC's most recent report was, "There is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all." Every year we fail to act, the level of difficulty and cost to reduce emissions goes up, but it's possible to shift course. Emergency brakes. The IPCC report lays out many known remedies and shows what would make the biggest difference to keep warming as low as possible, and also how people can adapt to the climate hazards that are now inevitable. Solutions don't need to be broad, expensive, complicated. We actually don't have time for those. Solutions can and should be small, targeted, and ready to go. They can include expanding solar and wind power, improving energy efficiency, making cities friendlier for walkers or cyclists, eating better, reducing food waste, reusing and repairing items at scale. An industry that caught my attention several years ago was the electric conversion of gas-powered vehicles. Electric conversions are a well-known solution for upgrading commercial vehicle fleets, and then many auto shops offer this service for individual passenger cars, usually rare electric cars. During the conversion process, all internal combustion engine components are removed, like the gas tank, the engine, and they're replaced with an electric motor, battery, wiring, and other components. In this example, created by Felton in the UK, you can see that all the electric components for this Mini Cooper are laid out on the ground, ready to be installed. It struck me that this industry and solution fits squarely in the category of granular, targeted, ready to go. The only issue is that it's expensive and inaccessible. So that was exactly the kind of problem I thought would be interesting to use my design thinking skills to solve. So what did I do? I started a company. At NICE, we aim to address both the waste of always buying new and discarding the old, and to reduce carbon emissions by getting gas-powered cars off the road. NICE is an acronym for No Internal Combustion Engine. EV conversions are an interesting solution, but will only create real impact when done at scale. Right now, the industry is set up for bespoke, high-end, performance-driven conversions for rare collector vehicles. Most people spend at least $50,000, but they can easily cost upwards of $100,000. This Luna's car right here that David Beckham is very proud of is about a $300,000 or $400,000 car, maybe more. Celebrities and the ultra-wealthy are typical customers. This bespoke custom process means that they're very expensive and they take a long time. With NICE, we are tackling the mass adoption problem. It's a here and now solution. A converted EV can be both exciting and affordable. It can be made more accessible by converting identical vehicles in fleets or in batches. We see a parts cost reduction through bulk purchasing and a labor hours reduction by eliminating R&D time and implementing factory-style assembly line operations. In turn, we can treat this less like a bespoke object and more like a product that benefits from optimizations and improvements that you simply can't do with a one-off conversion. So in turn, the end product, the user experience, the reliability is simply better. Remanufacturing vehicles and salvaging functional components takes advantage of the embodied carbon and value inherent in existing objects. Remember that technical cycle, keeping things in use. And converting a used vehicle to electric results in 80% less CO2 emissions than manufacturing a brand new EV from scratch. We're focusing on scaling in California. This state contains the largest market share of registered vehicles in the US. Half of them are driven on the streets of LA County. And as many as 40% of registered vehicles are ideal candidates for conversion. Older analog vehicles that are lighter weight, appealing from a design standpoint. Maybe they have a cult following, many of them on the road still. Many drivers don't realize that their existing vehicle could be a good candidate for EV conversion. So a lot of our work is in educating everyone out there and in finding opportunities to reduce cost through economies of scale, tax rebates, and grants. It's a great pool to draw from California when recruiting cohorts of customers that own identical vehicles. Once we hit our production phase, our plan is to convert in batches of 15 or more. We're just at the beginning. This past spring, my company was accepted into the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, LACI, or LACI. Here's a photo of the LACI campus in downtown LA where we're doing R&D and getting business development support and access to grant and funding opportunities. After taking an EV Conversion 101 course a couple of years ago, my mechanic, Sarah Lyon, and I set out to build the first nice prototype, a 1987 Suzuki Samurai. This R&D vehicle serves as our test platform to perfect the recipe, which we then will repeat with our first cohort of customers for a batch of Suzuki Samurai EVs. The goals were to keep it aspirational, yet accessible. It's a lightweight car with a cult following, it's adorable, and I knew that it would stand out on the road compared to most new EVs. Our focus was on simplicity, approachability, and ease of use. So in July, we completed the R&D build. Within a week of hitting the streets, it won Best SUV at the Electrify Expo in Denver. We've since had several organic inbound inquiries about Samurai conversions, and we're working with our first customer through a pilot at the end of this year and into the beginning of next year. By summer of next year, we're aiming to show a small fleet of Samurais at the Long Beach Electrify Expo with potential exposure to tens of thousands of attendees. Has anyone here been to the Electrify Expo in Long Beach? You should go next year. It's really cool. It's right down the road. We'll also be selecting our next vehicle platform with a strong possibility that we're going to be focusing on 80s and 90s Volvo wagons to serve as an option for families looking for a 7-seater EV. Something that I have found very difficult now that I have 2 car seats to fit into my daily driver. There are not a lot of 7-seater EVs unless you want to buy a $100,000 Rivian. So let's transition to how industrial designers today can consider working towards a circular economy. We know that the way we make and use things has a huge impact on resource use and on the climate. Around 55% of global emissions could be addressed through our transition to renewable energy, but that's just a little over than half. The other half of emissions comes from industry, food, and land use. For that quarter down there in the yellow square of emissions that are related to industry, the manufacture and use of everyday products and infrastructure, this part of the climate change challenge will require new business models, new ways to make things, new behaviors, and new relationships between people and stuff. In her paper titled Designers as Change Agents in the Circular Economy, designer and researcher Katja Fleischman said that design can act as a bridge and a catalyst for the circular economy due to the discipline's problem-solving skills and due to design's intermediary role between various stakeholders. So from industrial to regenerative, or whatever you choose to call it, designers are invaluable problem solvers in addressing global challenges. A career in circularity has long-term viability. It's there for the taking. You have everything you need to become an expert in this area. Companies need this expertise, and they're hiring for this expertise now and in the coming years. A director from the Great Recovery said, "We urgently need all designers to visit end-of-life facilities so they can see for themselves," that means landfills, "so we can see for themselves how we are blindly designing waste into the system by creating products that are complex and increasingly harder to deconstruct and recycle. Waste and pollution don't happen accidentally. They are a result of design decisions. Look through your portfolio of work. If you have products that have been produced at scale, picture them in your mind. How many of these objects are still being actively used? How many are forgotten in a closet or a drawer? thrown out with the trash, or floating in pieces in our oceans. It's not just the materials that are wasted, but your embedded energy, resources, labor, creativity are lost too. We should have a clear understanding of where the things that we designed end up. Circularity should be a very common consideration in product development. Designers and people working in the creative industries bring a mindset that is unique, that the impossible is solvable. Everything was impossible once. It just got solved. Imagine how much progress there would be in the world if even just a quarter of the world's industrial designers focused solely on the issue of circularity. So as you can tell, I've done a ton of research. I read this paper so you and others, so that you don't have to. I synthesized the takeaways of them, and I'll share them with you over the next few slides. The title of this is How Circular is Current Design Practice. Industrial design is talked a lot about in this paper. So first, barriers and critiques. There are companies that are hesitant because they're worried about their bottom line. Consumers don't really understand the issue, and so then they're not interested in it. There's a limited willingness for people to collaborate across the value chain. That means like designers, manufacturers, salespeople, etc. And there's kind of a perception that that term circular economy or regenerative design is so broad and catch-all that it starts to just really not mean anything specific. And so it's confusing. But then there's a lot of opportunities. I'm going to talk first about opportunities for designers. I'm going to go into each of these. But first, think holistically. 2, design for circularity. And 3, communicate and advocate. First, think holistically. Designers should take on the role of solutions provider rather than object creator. With systems thinking, you can think about the entire product lifecycle and design services instead of products. Consider designing each part of a solution simultaneously and incrementally, like design your physical object, the business model, and the leasing platform, all at the same time. Collaborate with business students. Do it together. Understanding of evolving consumer behaviors and social trends can help you anticipate future use cycles of products and create desire for circular solutions. So become a sociologist, sort of. For this to work, there needs to be a tight collaboration across the value chain. Designer, engineer, manufacturer, procurement, sales team, executive decision makers, your bosses, your interns. Designers have the ability to become the orchestrators who use co-creation strategies to stage negotiations between all these stakeholders and align values. 2, design for circularity. So as a stakeholder orchestrator, hopefully you are doing your part to advocate and educate about the value of circularity, and in doing so, you can begin to pump the brakes on planned obsolescence. First, aim to design out waste. Tactically, this might look like eliminating multi-layered packaging and using only mono material instead if you become a packaging designer. Stop doing these films on top of paper. Stop doing these, the wrappers around your glass bottles. That doesn't get recycled because there's a plastic wrapper around it. You have to cut it off. Just don't design it that way. You can also consider intentional and deliberate design approaches like adaptive reuse, design for disassembly, design for repair and remanufacturing, or even designing only compostable products. Imagine if consumable products, they're used frequently and wear out, were also compostable. Things like house slippers, storage baskets, doormats, phone cases, dish towels, things you use that kind of get worn out, they should be compostable. Next, become a materials expert. Be mindful when assessing and selecting options for the products that you're designing. Or take your interest in materials to another level and make friends with your classmates in the chemistry department. Maybe you can create a breakthrough packaging solution together and start a company. Number 3, communicate and advocate. My industrial design education here at Long Beach equipped me with the ability to craft compelling stories. Leverage that skill that you're building and use it to champion circular economy principles. Educate your clients, your colleagues, your bosses. Organize activities or groups. Start a salon series. Write letters to your senators and representatives. Vote for policies that are good for the planet. You can also vote with your daily purchases. Take a moment. Do I really need this? Sleep on it. When job searching, prioritize interviews with certified B corporations or companies that have clear evidence of their efforts to make a positive impact. Patagonia and Sonos are great examples in the local area. Now, opportunities for collaboration across business and culture. Education, policy and economics, and innovation. So first, education. Circularity needs to be embedded into the industrial design curriculum. In my very first design lecture in 2001, right down the hall, Professor Chuck Leinbach said to my class, seriously, like the first day I sat down in class, you know, the things that you all are going to be designing are going to end up in landfills. Don't ever forget that. And if you don't want to be involved in that, leave the room. We talked a bit about sustainability during my time here, but we didn't have the context that we have today. We can't let another designer hear what I heard without being taught what to do about it. And designers need to understand what need to understand the economy in order to change it. It would be incredible to see students studying economic theory, business, and collaborating closely with students majoring in those topics. This program does a great job educating designers about manufacturing. I think more schools should work to preserve and adapt traditional craft and manufacturing skills as well. Number 2, policy and economics. Business executives and lawmakers can come together and co-develop accreditations that support circularity. Regulations and policies can also be created to encourage transparency in supply chains, and economic incentives can be developed to encourage consumer participation. Activists can work with policymakers and professionals to ensure circular solutions are accessible and beneficial to all communities, and address potential job displacement with new opportunities in the circular economy. And then third, the designers can work with business strategists to create viable circular business models that balance both impact and profit. Third, innovation. Designers and scientists can leverage advancements in materials research to identify circular solutions for products and for packaging. We can use digital tools to share, track, and manage circular life cycles, supply chains, and manufacturing processes, tracking their transparency and impact. The good news is there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But a circular economy is not about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and our economy coming together. We have a really fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. With creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future. Here's a short video that shows some examples of how some people are doing that.
What we try to do is design it from the start in a way that it can come back in the same product.
When you throw something away, where is away? There is no away. We live in a world with finite materials. Products are made cheaper and cheaper, disposable and more disposable on a daily basis. You take raw materials, you process the raw material, you make a product, then the consumer uses it for a certain amount of time, and then it's thrown in the bin.
Plastic bottles and ketchup sachets, you use them for probably a few minutes.
Project and pass into a second project. And I think the second thing I'd say is none of us are going to solve this problem on our own. This problem is going to be solved by lots and lots and lots of people all chipping away at their little bit of the problem. So I think if your problem is not going to save the world on its own, that's okay.
The writer Pico ER said, "In an age of acceleration, nothing can be more exhilarating than going slow. In an age of distraction, nothing is so luxurious as paying attention. And in an age of constant movement, nothing is so urgent as sitting still. We should look to nature, not just for the circular economy, but also to consider new ways to regard ourselves and our abilities and our rhythms. We operate in seasons, in rhythms. We have good days and bad days. We aren't machines. We are facing some tough challenges, so we need to remember this as we are considering a regenerative future. Go easy on yourselves. Happier designers produce better work. Give yourself space and time for dreaming and for curiosity. And you don't need weeks or months or a year-long sabbatical to follow your curiosity and find that healthy rhythm. You can weave the practice into everyday life. The shadows you notice dancing on the ground might prompt you to pull out your camera and start capturing the beauty around you, which could lead to a new practice of creative observation. A solo walk around your neighborhood might lead to an unexpected and unfamiliar route that leads you to a community garden where you could start volunteering and Maybe then decide you want to design a series of compostable garden tools. Reading an intriguing article might lead to a prolific journaling session, and realize that you want to start a TikTok channel to inspire others working in circularity. Flexing your curiosity muscles makes you more open to opportunities and inspiration than you might have become blind to in your day-to-day. Don't take the safer path. Follow your curiosity, and you'll discover breakthrough ideas that just might change the course of our planet. That's all I have. Thank you so much.